Welcome to the Oshow. I'm Laura Babcock, and this is our year-end scandal panel final. And everyone loves the scandal panel. I was on the Dean Blundell show just yesterday. We were just talking about it. And he's a big fan of the show because Keith Leslie, Queen's Park Bureau reporter forever, and Mark Cripps, who is an actual comms director inside the Ministry of Housing, have been doing an amazing job since the Greenbelt Scandal blew sky high. And guys, I was kind of wondering after Ford said he was going to take 9 weeks vacation, until after Family Day, that there'd be nothing to talk about. But I booked you anyway. And I'm so happy that I did, because not only do the crisis in our ERs continue, and do we see all the problems with housing go on and on and on, day by day by day, the stories keep getting worse, but we have the Premier putting out a slurry video of himself at a hospital fundraiser, and if that wasn't bad enough and cringe enough, today he puts out, I'm not kidding, I don't know if you've seen it, a video of him making a gingerbread house and telling everyone to go out and get one. And so I have lots of thoughts on that, not the least of which his saccharine facade, I ain't buying it anymore. And the fact that he can't get houses built makes it beyond ironic. But I was kind of wondering if maybe he'd, when he said he'd give us all $500,000 houses with picket fences, in a basement, he was talking about gingerbread, because that's the only thing that's making sense. And I was going to toast you guys off the top of the show with champagne, but I admit I drank it all when I saw that finally a poll came out saying that the people of Ontario have realized, the majority of the people polled, that Doug Ford is not really in it for them. He's not in it for the little guy. Aw, shucks, folks. He's in it for his pals, his rich buddies. So guys, cheers to the end of a hellish year. There you go. And next time, maybe it'll be champagne, but I gotta celebrate good news when I hear it.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's start there, Keith. Before I get to other things you've got on your scandal watch, what did you think when that poll came out? And it was like a majority of Ontarians realized that the emperor has no clothes.
Well, finally, it's about time. I mean, I think a lot of us is why we've been hammering this message time and time again. He really was leading, though, with his chin, with this gingerbread house thing, coming out with your folksy video. And we all know that folksy stuff's not playing anymore. There's too many serious things going on, particularly in housing, your one signature file that you've had to backtrack on so massively. And despite that, here's what we didn't get a chance to talk about, and it's happened in the last couple of weeks, was the housing minister apologizing to the builders and industrial land developers, the very people, not to the people of Ontario, but to these poor people we've had to deny your $8.3 billion land improvements or zoning improvements. I mean, this kind of massive profits because, gee, we're so sorry. And the minister repeated this several times, once to one specific developer, Mr. De Gaspers. I mean, he's just doing this to the point that one of the developers said, "What is he doing? He's making it look like we're in bed together." Well, that's kind of what the whole thing has looked like for the whole darn time. Apology, I don't even know how to describe it in front of the Builders Association. They then build, they're known as BILD. They write an open letter back to the government saying, "You, the province, are committing us to unaffordable housing for generations to come. You have no coherent housing plan. And by your actions, there's basically 300,000 units that are not going to be built."
Go ahead.
No, these are the association, the developers that he apologized to, the speculators, the very people, not to the people of Ontario, but to these people. So to your point about the poll at the beginning, yes, this is why the poll is showing that all of a sudden, he's not in it for us. He might go to Timmy's and talk about a double-double, but he's not in it for us, is he? He's in it for these people who are, "I'm so sorry you didn't get that $8.3 billion land improvements, zoning improvements." Jeez, and many times he repeated that apology. It's just stunning in itself.
I think I posted that, he's like kissing the ring of the king. Like, why else do you have to, why else would you do that in that environment? And then to have the king not even be satisfied and the letter come back. I mean, it's humiliation on top of humiliation. It's almost farcical. You must be dying to comment, Mark, since you know all these guys from when you were inside the Ministry of Housing and they were trying to get you guys to give them, out of the Greenbelt and MZOs and the rest.
It's funny. I spoke to somebody in the development community who was at that event, and he said it did not go over well among the building community. That it was embarrassing. These are the words that were being used. It did not go over well, and it was embarrassing. And then I was into work recently, and I ran into a colleague of mine from the bureaucracy. Who described working for the Ministry of Chaos. And I said, do you mean the Ministry of Backtracking? He said, well, yes, that too. I think John Michael McGrath said it, had a great column this week. He said, this year has been Doug Ford's 3 R's: reverse, retreat, and renege. And I thought that was the perfect way to put it. And then I also like Bonnie Crombie's recent interview where she said, this is a government going backwards. And, that to me, I think is the most frustrating part of this year is that, the government wasted so much time. Nothing. We're in January 2023, right? We haven't started anything that the government was planning around housing. Some of the stuff that was in the housing task force, which would have actually, if was implemented, that had broad support. Like remind people that this had broad support. So, I thought that was probably really a very sad moment for the government, especially Paul Calandra, who's inherited this file and now is literally being forced to go on 2 knees to beg for forgiveness. And I don't know how they think that is going to poll well with people. I don't know what strategy went into who wrote his speech and said, go and apologize. Holy crap.
The same idiot who thought that he should show Ontario how to make gingerbread houses when he can't hit any of his own housing targets. I mean, it's to say it was pathetic. I tweeted out, there's tone deaf, and then there's just pathetic. And I mean in the term of pathos, like this premier is so far outside of anything he can come back to. His reputation is done, the belief in him, now we've got the numbers to support it. People are like, no, you know what, I forget it. And even these are people who may not have needed to go to a hospital in the last 6 months. Because, in our mighty metropolis, Mark, there is an ER closing during the peak of respiratory infection over the holidays because of a lack of staffing. And we found out in the AG report that there are literally private nursing operations that are poaching nurses from our public hospitals in the parking lots. And then the Ford government is letting them sell those nursing services back at 3 times the cost to the taxpayer. And when asked about it, Ford's Minister of Health, I was going to say of destroying health, but of health, response is, we're not going to do anything. We have no plans to deal with that because it's a necessary tool. It's a tool if you're trying to destroy public health care and trying to enrich your friends. If you're trying to enfeeble that which we all need and deserve in this province to enrich your pals and your donors. I mean, the Greenbelt pissed me off, but what they're doing in healthcare, I mean, God forbid anyone watching this is sick. And I have to say something else that came up, gentlemen, since we last spoke, was the boring booze news that they tried to put out like some sexy bauble for all of us to forget during our Christmas holiday parties. Hey, you know what? Forget about them trying to take land out of protection, lie to us, enrich their billionaire development pals, and forget about that $500,000 underground parking lot for a secret spa nobody wants casino at Ontario Place. But yeah, you know what? In 2 years, dude, we can go to the corner store and get the booze that we, couldn't get 2 miles away at the LCBO. Rock on. I mean, we're not that fucking stupid in Ontario, Doug Ford, and all your people with your videos. And the first booze video was so lame. that they re-upped it with a second one the next day. And it is like, just stop. It's boring booze news. We don't care. We care about healthcare.
Well, when the messaging from the emergency department is, sorry, we're closed, call 911. I don't know what to say to that. And the message, as you say, in response from the government is, hey, booze everywhere in 2 years, election year, by the way. But we're going to talk about it now because, boy, there's a whole hell of a lot of stuff we don't want to talk about, specifically the closed emergency departments. Not small communities anymore. We're talking major cities, Hamilton, 2 emergency departments this weekend, right? It's closed. It's happening everywhere. And literally the instruction is, well, just call 911, well, or, maybe 811 or 311, or someone will help you somewhere if you pick up the phone. But your publicly funded hospital emergency department is going to be closed because we just don't have the staff. And back to Laura's point that this report pointed out, the nurses are coming off 12-hour shifts where they're worked, this is just still, the pandemic's still with us. They're just in the respiratory season, everything else you pointed out. And in the parking lot, they're being recruited. How'd you like to work better shifts? But in fact, no shifts, maybe no weekends. Come to, and we'll double your money and we'll charge the hospital 3 to 4 times. And that's what's happening. The hospitals are paying 3 to 4 times for an agency nurse to stand side by side with a staff nurse who knows what they're being paid and knows she can go out in the parking lot and perhaps just change her whole income situation and her family situation, her personal life, just by signing up with this and going. The temptation is obvious, and it's more than a temptation.
I don't blame the nurses.
Affordability is an issue for everybody, and it's something that's not being addressed. And this guy, I can go on. There's so many things. The public, emergency departments is just so scary for all of us. And as you say, they're undermining public health care all over the place. Why should we fund to keep our public hospital surgical suites open when we can just have our friends build private emergency suites or surgical suites, and we'll pay them 2 to 3 times what we're paying the public hospitals with their non being used surgical suites. We'll do it in private.
And Keith, I don't know if everyone gets this, but correct me if I'm wrong, and we'll speak in broad strokes here, because it's about a pattern of behavior, right? It's about a scheme. So we have long-term care going privatized and legislation being brought in by Ford to make it harder to sue private operators. And we have a former premier, I believe, who's got investments in long-term care privatization. We have a lobbyist for a private hospital since, things started to privatize, who used to be a health minister, I believe, in Doug Ford's government. Correct me if I'm wrong on that one. And we have, if I'm not mistaken, an ownership stake in a private nursing agency that may be profiteering off this pandemic that also has a connection to that glorious progressive conservative party of Ontario. Am I right, gentlemen? Am I being
your only mistake there? Your only mistake there is there's more than one former conservative premier associated with long-term care homes, on the board of directors and profiting from long-term care, which they privatized, and brought in. I think it's now around 60% of our long-term care is privatized. It's going to be more. Home care. Remember when the Victorian era nurses just sort of took care of everything when someone got sick, and when we were young, you saw their cars, you knew what they were doing. Well, they got outbid. Now, this wasn't necessarily on the Conservatives, but the Liberals let some of this happen too. But to the point where those agencies now are just basically, they're a shell of what they used to be. But private corporations are there buying each other up and investing in, we've got real estate investment trust investing in long-term care homes. Well, maybe they could build us some hospitals. Well, we're going to build our own surgical suites. We'll own private hospitals, and this government is funding them and taking the money from the public unit. And not just, if it was dollar for dollar, even, it was just ideological dollar for dollar, but we believe private sector can do this better, fine. But the reports, the studies don't say that. The outcomes are worse. We saw it in our own long-term care homes. The privately owned and run ones were far worse, for far more mortality, far more deaths, and far more widespread COVID cases. Just right there, evidence to our own eyes, and yet we're going to continue down that path. And you said that the health minister, we sometimes describe her as the one, she's in the witness protection program, because we just don't ever hear from her other than to say, well, the agency nurses, they're just, we need them. They're a part of their tool, part of the process.
It wouldn't be it's horrible that we have a government that's so incompetent that they would pay triple for a service that they could have had maintained if they just invested in nurses and met some of the nursing requirements during the pandemic and, valued nursing and our healthcare heroes. They wouldn't have this exodus of nurses, but they created a crunch and a problem, and then there's the solution, which they're paying too much for, obnoxious. But the fact that it's their friends that are literally taking the taxpayer money back at triple the rate, that's fucking disgusting, guys. I mean, it looks like something out of a movie, but it's happening in front of us. And I swear, if I didn't see those poll numbers changing and I didn't know that we could get this government on their knees with protests like the Greenbelt and the notwithstanding clause for the teaching assistants, I would feel a lack of hope. Mark?
Well, isn't it ironic? I find this is the biggest irony of this government, in my mind, is that they are a conservative government, so-called fiscally responsible, and yet they are, they're blowing money like nobody's business. Like the Ontario budget is like insanely, like, you think, God, like, when, I mean, she got criticized for spending too much money. These guys are making her look like she was, on the cheap. Like she had literally had a plan to get back in balance. These guys are blowing money, but where's that money going? Right. This is the key, and I think this is why I wanted to loop back to your point. Is that I feel like these days when conservatives get in power, it's literally like eternal Christmas for anybody who supports them. It's like it's a scheme to funnel money to the elite class in this country who are continuing to go to those fundraisers, to all the things that they do to keep these guys in power, and the public is completely like oblivious. I'm not going to say maybe they're catching on finally. I look at poll numbers, and Doug Ford the PCs are still polling in majority territory.
Yeah, but we haven't seen Bonnie show what she can do as an offering yet, right? So that's a factor.
But they're good at messaging, right? They're so good at, if you were waiting for a hip or knee replacement, if you needed your cataracts dealt with, we're going to get it done quicker. And that does play. And it plays with not just the people who need those surgeries, but with their families, their friends. Yeah. Of course, it's, false. It's just a false economy when we say that. We could shorten those waiting lists. We could do away with them. And report after report has said so if we just keep our publicly funded hospital surgical suites open. It's all about, as you say, making a case for the private sector to come to rescue us from a system we've destroyed intentionally or undermined as much as we possibly can and still have it be a system.
Yeah, someone said to me today when I posted a lot about this gingerbread video, it was so ridiculous. Someone said it reminded them of when Trump threw the paper towels at the hurricane victims. And I said, yeah, if Trump had caused the hurricane. I mean, that's how much worse it is with Ford. It's not just cringy. Like, create the crisis in housing by taking away rent controls and not investing in affordable housing and getting upset when the feds are trying to swoop in and help, not caring about the people at all, and then doing a video about how to build a modular gingerbread house and everyone go out and get one. He's creating the crisis.
But the real impact of the Ford government's failure to govern for everyone is the rural Ontario is starting to see the worst of it. And yet, will we see any movement in those areas where people are so polarized? We live in this polarized world now.
Let's wait and see if they've, God forbid, there's a lot of heart attacks over the holidays. If they're driving through a snowstorm to their local ER and find out that it's closed because Ford is, eviscerating, enfeebling, whatever word you want to use, the healthcare system. I mean, I think once families with autism who can't access services, I think once people experience what it's like to find the crumbs falling off the table are not even sufficient to feed your family and to survive, I think they just might be done with this fairy tale facade of the Ford government and progressive conservatives either wanting to conserve good services or progress us in any way. This is regressive. This is grifting. It is complete bullshit. And gentlemen, in the last minute that we have, I would have asked you what was your biggest aha news moment of the year, but I mean, let's face it, RCMP, Greenbelt reversal, on and on and on. How could we possibly select? It would be cruel of me as a host to make you pick. So I'm just going to ask you in the last 2 minutes, each of you a minute, what is your prediction for 2024? Is Ford ever going to be able to put himself back in a box that looks remotely like a government? Or are we just going to watch rollout after rollout of one more embarrassing scandal after another? Keith, to you, sir.
Well, I think I'm going to start with the last news conference we had with Major Cabinet Minister, which was Minister Calandra. And the press gallery, including Cynthia Mulligan, actually delivered the question, but she started with, this was the government stuck in reverse question. Basically, you reversed yourself on your disbanding Peel. I'm checking my notes here. The green energy contracts, the Greenbelt land swap, ministerial zoning orders, municipal boundaries, municipal audits, development charges, autism, license plates, public sector wage freeze, and notwithstanding clause. And the whole gallery's piling in with these questions. And she looks at them and says, do you guys think of anything before you act? And it was the bang on question, but just everyone was piping up with the notwithstanding clause, the green, like different reversals that this government has done just in the past year, most of them. And again, almost everyone was ones where they were told, if you do this, this is going to happen. This is not going to go well. And then in almost every single case, it has not gone well for this government. They do not listen to people when they're going ahead. They just plow ahead. The Greenbelt land swap being the most obvious example, but there was so many more that were listed there. I think that's the future for this government. Every time they pop their head up, they're just going to get this type of question. And the Minister Callander, we've given him credit before for just talking the story to death and trying to, just put the lid on it. He said, isn't it good that we're wide open and flexible?
I did ask, that's hilarious. I did ask Kathleen Wynne. Everyone should check it out. I just interviewed her the other day on the Oshow as you're binging your Oshow during the holidays. I asked her about that. I said, isn't it kind of good though in a way that this government does reverse itself? And she said, Laura, yeah, but it's kind of a perverse way at getting at good policy. How about not have the terrible policies in the first place? So you're going to want to check that out. Just quickly to you, Mark, what does 2024 look like from your scandal panel lens?
Yeah, I think more of the same. I think we're still waiting for the RCMP investigation. I think the Ontario place, as that unravels, we're going to have more. I think this is a government in free fall. I'm not sure beer in corner stores is going to save it. They're and like you mentioned earlier, Bonnie Crombie will start getting her legs under her as she gets more well known. Merritt Stiles is still doing a great job. The opposition is going to start really being on fire, and I think this government's going to be scrambling. I don't know how they're going to, what is their campaign going to be in 2026, right? They didn't build any houses. Right? Like, and I just
gingerbread houses. Come on, give them credit for one.
It's a lump of coal, and this is what Santa told me is going to be under Doug Ford's tree this year.
I love it. You brought props for the year-end show, Mark. You're a total pro. Keith, you also, sir, checking your notes while we're having fun here. I love that you're so diligent. The two of you make the great scandal panel. That's why everybody loves these shows. So when I look forward to 2024, I look forward to seeing both of you gentlemen back in these boxes so we can bring the latest of what's happening with the Ford government. And I hope in the new year that we won't see Bonnie and Merritt make the mistake that we saw Del Duca and Andrea make of going at each other for cheap points when we have to go after this premier with everything that we got to protect the people of Ontario. I mean, that's where it's at. Thank you both so much. And everyone watching across Canada and all over Ontario, we love, subscribe. 2024 is going to be crazy, but we're going to be here for it. So thank you so much and have a wonderful, safe holiday, everybody.
When you care about current affairs, it's on the Oshow. And when you want to get clear what's going on here, it's on the Oshow. If you like to stay in the know, tune yourself into the Oshow. It's the Oshow. Laura Babcock's the Oshow. With a lot of great guests, she puts them to the test on the Oshow. There's no doubt they'll be calling them out on the Oshow. Stand for something or fall for it all. Ontario, hear the call on the Oshow. It's a podcast, the Oshow. Laura Babcock's the Oshow. Stay informed with the Oshow.